We're going to move to session number 6. So, this is on enhancing learner engagement and it's on learning technology. First, let me introduce Mona Jain. She is the Global Head Learning and Talent DS Oracle. Mona is passionate about people development. She has been a coach and facilitator for various individuals and teams with leading multinational corporations. She was a lead for the culture department at Satyam, was part of the Leadership Institute at Infosys, and as a project manager for a support project there, and then as talent manager for 4 years. She also enjoyed the role of employee engagement track lead for Pune Infosys, following which she integrated back in the learning stream with Oracle at Hyderabad. She holds a first class master's degree in psychology and holds numerous certifications, including strategic management from IIM Kashipur, leadership skills from IIM Ahmedabad, and she's a Six Sigma Green Belt holder. Mona, welcome to the conference and welcome to this session.
Thank you, Zubin. A pleasure.
And now let me introduce Naveen Janjirala. He is the head learning platforms, Dr. Reddy's. Naveen comes with a rich experience of 15 years in areas like defining and implementing learning architecture for enterprises, learning and talent platforms, competency frameworks, e-learning content creation, learning support, learning analytics, assessment center, and vendor management. Prior to joining Dr. Reddy's, Naveen had spent 13 years with Wipro, where his contribution helped to transform Wipro to one of the best learning organizations in the industry. He was architect in chief for the entire learning ecosystem, redefined the key process and replaced the legacy applications with the digital learning systems. He was the brainchild behind many path-breaking initiatives from pre-hire to retire process. Naveen was one of the key members in the team which enabled to win 13 times the Association of Talent Development ATD award for Wipro. And on a personal aspect, apart from work, Naveen is extremely passionate about automobiles, and he keeps track of the latest industry developments and new models to be launched in India. And he loves his wristwatches, has close to a dozen of them, and the latest addition to his kit is the Tissot. And that's one thing that I would say in the past I shared the same passion, Naveen. Now I don't have that passion anymore, but I used to have so many watches that people used to criticize me for that. But that's the probably one of the reasons why we became punctual. I don't know.
Agree to that. Yes.
So Naveen, welcome
Thank
to
you,
the
Zubin.
conference and welcome to this session. I'm
Thank you,
really
Zubin. Hello,
glad
Mona.
that
Nice to
I have Mona and Naveen in this session, and I'm going to start off with Mona with my first question. So the way we look at learner engagement, I would look at it from a macro level and a micro level. So I want to start it from the macro level. So the learner engagement is essential in ensuring learning. If you don't engage them, then what's the point of even having this learning intervention in place? So according to you, Mona, what are the different ways in which learners can be engaged in the learning process? And if you have a macro level view, would love to hear from you. And any experiences you've had, anything that you can share as practical insights.
All right. Thanks again. And thanks everyone for having me here. Before I get into the experiences, let me just share a very short story about, it's just going to set the stage for what I'm going to talk. So this is about a small village in US, and it's in the midst of winter. There's a blizzard, and there's an old farmer who takes time out on a Sunday to go and attend the Sunday Mass. So he trudges through the multiple feet of snow and somehow gets to the church. Now, when he gets to the church or the chapel, he realizes that he's about the only one who's actually come out in this kind of a weather. So the clergyman, the minister, They wait for some time, and then the minister says, well, since nobody's turned up, how about we just go back to our homes and sit down with a hot cup of coffee or tea? And the farmer just looks at him and he says, I am a simple farmer, but in this weather, if I were to go out to feed my cattle and only one cow came, I would still feed the cow. And the clergyman realizes his mistake and he says, all right, let's have the mass. So he performs the entire service, the bells, the whistles, the hymns, everything, almost for a couple of hours. And then at the end of it, he's happy that he's learned a lesson, and he is also humbled. So he, shakes the old farmer's hand and he says, thank you so much for teaching me this lesson. And the farmer says, you know what, I'm just a simple farmer. And in this weather, if I were to go out to feed my cattle and only one came to the fence, the cow, I wouldn't put the fodder for the entire cattle in front of that cow. And the minister then realizes a bigger lesson learned. And I think the reason why this story popped up as I was listening to Sarika and Sushmita in the previous session was the questions that came up. We were talking about learner engagement. We were talking about being specific, customizing, what's in it for me. Learner engagement starts from the time you think of the learner as a person who has to have a buy-in for whatever it is that he or she wants to learn. So I started my career teaching, first in schools, then colleges, then the workplace, the industry. Now, one of the things that I've come across is that there's a myth that learning is for when you're growing up, school and college. Once you're done with your studies, once you've gotten into the industry, you've arrived. Now you have the knowledge and you can go about doing your work. So first of all, that myth needs to be busted. Now, with over 2 decades of work experience, I started off with a certain perspective. I'm very much like that minister who keeps learning lessons as I progress. But now I think I've matured my work style to a point where I don't bring the individual into an ecosystem that is already available and established and say, all right, this is where you are, swim, adapt. It doesn't work that way. So what I'm now trying to do is finding a way to create a customized environment and a learning path for the individual, wherein that person is able to see why he or she should learn. And this becomes a very satisfying journey for both the individual who's learning and for me as a coach or a supporter of the learner. Now, how do I even get started on this? Because it sounds all good, but then with multiple learners, how do we get into that? Well, the first thing that I start off with is trying to understand the person. Now, here's where the psychology that I've got a background in comes in. I try to understand what drives the individual. Where is she or he coming from? Their background, their career aspirations, their trajectories, their goals. What are their passions? Now, this gives me the, pretty much the ammunition which is required to light their journey. Now, once we understand what is it that they like, what is it that they want to do, we discuss between the management and the learner, we discuss about what is it that would make sense for the learner to learn. While we talk about, yes, they are in an industry, yes, they need to learn, yes, the bottom line is business and revenue. While the learner learns what takes her or him from point A to point B, where they are being effective for the business, the other thing is the learner has to enjoy the learning. Now, this is one funda that I have been very, very particular about since I started my career, back when I started teaching kids to even now, even leaders. If you're having fun, learning just becomes a very, it's a joyride. as opposed to something being forced down your throat. So while we tailor the learning for various technologies and functionalities, I also encourage the learner to learn anything that they want to just because. There doesn't have to be a reason, there doesn't have to be a goal. All of us harbor curiosities. We just heard Zubin say about Naveen having this passion for automobiles and watches. Now, each one of us has the curiosity, the inner child in us. Why suppress it? So, one of the things I often ask of my learners is, while you're learning things which help you in your work, pick up one thing which has nothing to do with work. Anything. It could be dancing, swimming, cooking, learning a foreign language. A few years back, there was this whole furor about Bitcoin, and people were curious to know about that. Go ahead. The bottom line is, if you're learning, you're growing. And once the learner understands that where I'm coming from, what I'm learning now, how is it going to define my career? How is it going to help me achieve my goals? You don't have to push the employee. You don't have to try to force anything on him or her. It's an automatic buy-in. They connect the dots and they take it forward. So my job is to ensure that I help them see that. And there was this book I had read quite a few years back called You Don't Send a Duck to an Eagle School, right? So it talks about how each person is individual and you have to customize the learning so that the engagement comes in. Also, once the learning has been identified, saying, okay, this is what we need to learn on, we can't just say, all right, go attend this class or go do that course. Each one of us has a different learning style. Some of us learn visually. You need to read, you need to go through a course, you need to see a video. Some of us prefer listening. Some of us prefer getting our hands dirty. So what is it that works for the learner? The learner is the end customer for the learning professional. And while we are looking at doing all this to meet the business's bottom line, unless you engage the learner over here and get him or her to buy into the learning, to focus, to enjoy, and to grow with it, that bottom line is not going to be met. So you need to customize everything at every step of the way. So this is pretty much what I mean by the learner engagement at a macro level. From the moment you get the person in to the point you offer a bouquet of learning for that individual. And now with the pandemic, we have a whole new era that's opened up in terms of technology, in terms of how we are making things happen. But primarily, this is the way I apply it, Zubin.
Yes, completely agree with you, Mona. Thank you so much for that. And so, Naveen, Mona gave us an insight on the macro level of engagement. And so, my question to you is, what has your experience been in managing learning and engagement at the micro level? And I would also like to connect the topic of learning technology. In fact, just to give you a heads up, in one of our sessions before lunch, there was a question related to learning technology. I will come to you with that a little later. But first of all, let's make this connect. So here's the macro level. What about the micro level? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think firstly, very good afternoon to everyone, to all my fellow colleagues in the L&D professional. And Zubin, thank you for having me here. Firstly, I think I agree to a lot of points from where Mona could actually, speak about learning engagement. And I certainly feel that, learning engagement is possibly and probably the most widely spoken about in the community, and for all the known reasons, and the reasons why it is so important. At the same time, connecting back the dots, possibly technology in the L&D professional is something which is very less spoken about, or possibly comes in the last bucket, on the priority list that we have. And I'm going to talk about it as to how technology today helps not only engagement possibly, but various other areas. But taking two steps behind on learning engagement, I see that there are two things that you could do, which broadly classifies inside the learning engagement, and we could obviously add more. But the first one for me, which comes to my mind, is as we were discussing, is the purpose of learning. Right? If you have the purpose of learning rightly defined and articulated to the learner, I think that's where your half the battle is won, because you obviously have that buy-in right in the beginning. So if you see any of your MOOCs, any of the technologies that we have right now, which has huge of content, libraries of content, the first thing is the course outline. You have a speaker comes in and takes that 2 minutes, 3 minutes to tell you what is the purpose of that course. Then you want to enroll, you don't want to enroll, it's up to you, right? So I think the purpose of learning is something very important for you to kind of tie that back to the learner. And second is obviously technology, which I'd want to kind of dwell a little more on this topic, right? So traditionally and over these years, we always know, and we all know, that technology is being the key enabler for whatever the problem is. But let's today focus more on the learning engagement part of it, right? So even in the learning engagement, I broadly classify based on my experiences working in larger organizations, smaller organizations across different industries that I've been a part of. Uh, there are two or three areas that you can really look at. The first one is the gamification. So there are a lot of tools and technologies where you can gamify within the content, and ensure that you provide the content in such a way that you obviously keep that milestones, try to kind of bring in that competitiveness, try to create that engagement. It could be online mode, or it could be a classroom mode of delivery. So gamification plays an important role. There are a lot of tools, or you can traditionally use the PBL framework, the points, badges, and the leadership framework, which a lot of platforms today provide, which you can customize your own badge names, your own design and icon of the badges, and decide your own levels, which gives that competitiveness spirit between the learner to kind of do more, and get their engagement levels on the platform higher. Right. So that is the first area that you can bring in technology. The second area is the social and collaboration. See, what I always feel is learners' behavior and the way that they're learning is always been changing over the years, and it will continue to do so even for the coming years. But at least one thing which comes out very clear is the modern day learner wouldn't want to kind of learn from a single person. It could be a faculty or one source of learning, especially when there is a cohort, especially then there are group of people, right? So social and communities, and collaboration is a very important technology tool that will enable all the participants or all the people in a small cohort to connect with each other, to check, hey, how did you solve this problem, right? It's not about learning, but it's about the application of learning. And you are thereby increasing the entire scope of learning, from learning to application, by creating the space using technology as an enabler to kind of talk to them, and build that rapport, right? Possibly the third area would be for me, the major area would be for me, is the mobility. Okay, so I think pretty much you can do anything right now out of your mobile. Your entire work moves with you out of your mobile. At the same time, I think we should also ensure that learning as well moves with your mobile. So anytime, anywhere, any device. I think you would have heard about this lingo many a times, but we often are found lagging to see how we can customize, how we can ensure that if there is a 6 day program or a 5 day program, not necessarily all the 6 days of learning has to be on mobile, right? It could be a small nuggets of learning of 6 minutes each that entices the learner to kind of come into the platform and go into the platform for learning. So there has to be essentially the mobile technology is also coming onto that, onto your frame of things. So possibly, I think these three would generally cover most of the areas that you would want to look at learning engagement, Zubin. So I think, yeah, back to you. If anything you want to add, that'd be great.
All right, I think that sums it up. In fact, one of the questions asked earlier, you've already answered it. It was about the use of technology in the present situation that we are in, specifically after the pandemic and the lockdown and the work from home scenario that we are into. But let me take some questions which have already come up in the question answer box. So I'll start with uh, Praveen. Praveen is asking Naveen to explain the PBL concept a little bit in detail. I don't know how much you can, but maybe you know,
I'll
if you can
I'll
keep
do
it
that.
brief, would be good
Possibly,
because we have lots of questions.
I'll yeah, I'll do that in maybe 30 seconds. So
Yeah.
traditionally, most of the platform comes in with a PBL framework, which is nothing but points, badges, and leadership. So what you can do is you can award points for any activity that you do on the platform, right? And using these points, you can acquire badges. You can say somebody is a fast learner, somebody has done all the assessments and created a compliance. And using the points, you can always create the leaderboards. So PBL essentially nothing but points, badges, and leaderboards. So if you want to know more, Praveen, just ping me on your LinkedIn, my LinkedIn, and I'd be really happy to help you.
All right, Naveen. Thanks. Thank you so much for that. Let me put this question to Mona because this comes from Manjeet Mohan. How do you measure learning engagement in your organization? Very, very specific to the point question.
Right. And thanks for that, Manjeet. And I would also like to, you know, go back a little bit and look at the question you mentioned before that, wherein how do you customize learning for individuals at organizations which operate at a large scale? We just have to, again, I go back and I keep repeating the same thing, but look at individuals because you're trying to do the learning for them. When we are a learner, what would you want is pretty much the question that I ask myself. Would you be happy just being told, do this, do that? Or would you be happy if somebody asked you, what is it that you want to do? And then try to make it happen. Um, it becomes challenging. Definitely, it is time consuming because you have to focus a lot of time and energy into understanding what the individual wants. At larger organizations, when you have more employees, have more L&D professionals who can invest the time, the learning partners that you have associated with each vertical, horizontal in your industry, in your company. You just have to have more of them so that the goal is to ensure that the learning becomes an enjoyable journey, which helps the organization reach its goal. So that's that. And how do we measure learning in my organization or the organizations that I've worked in? It's purely through application. When a person is learning something and is then able to apply it, then that is the learning which has been successful. That is the learning which has been effective because you're taking it from the storyboard from where you've picked it up and you're putting it directly into the project which you're working in. And that's the application that we're looking at, which is where it becomes important to customize the learning which is going to help the individual be more effective in her role or his role in the org, not generic learning. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mona. So I will. I think this is the largest number of questions I've got in any session. So I'm going to go through these questions. They're all relevant. So next question I would ask Naveen. So this question comes from Janil. Janil asks, what according to you are the must-have certifications for a beginner level training professional? Also, what are the recommended methods or tools to learn to make gamified content?
Yeah. See, on the first question, Zubin, I think we all of us know there are a lot of certifications available. There is an ADT certification. There is a lot of certifications. But one thing I always believe, that's my personal belief, though most of you can might not buy in. But I always believe more than certifications is just certification has always been just a qualifier for you. But the more hands-on experience that you have working for an L&D organization, working for different L&D organizations and different verticals, I think that speaks volume because a learning request or a training need analysis or the way you content package, the way you deliver the content is always different from industry to industry. It could be consulting, it could be IT, it could be BPS, or you look at manufacturing, tech, pharma, retail, right? So I would anyways prefer a guy in my team to be working in coming in from a diversified environment than picking a guy who's less experienced and but has a certificate. That's my take on it. But yeah, but I think all of us know there are a lot of certifications in the market. But and the second question was on how would you get on with the gamification? But again, gamification is something which is very very large. It is very very huge. It's often quoted in different terminologies in different ways. But first thing is you need to know what your organization wants at that point. Is it you want gamification within the content? Is it just for a boring content within its side? Or you were looking at a complete larger framework to be applied within the organization to improve the overall levels of engagement, right? So there is no one way or one methodology for you to begin with, but most importantly, you have to assess the need of your organization to get on with this journey. And trust me, any of these technologies today that we use, I always say the technology is a double-edged sword. If you're not using the tool rightly or properly, then you don't want to mess with it, right? So you have to ensure that you understand the need of the organization and go back to the tool. Then most of the times you look at the tool and say, hey, there's a very good tool, let me go back and apply it in the organization. That's always the wrong approach.
All right, great. Thanks, Naveen. So there's this next question from Neha Ashish Jain. How do we get the top management and the leaders get to learn? And what would be the suggested topics of learning for them? Again, I think the suggested topics, well, if you'd like, you could talk about it. It could be based on, it has to be customized, but should we adopt only digital and e-platforms for them, or do you think we could have a different approach for the top management or for the leaders to learn? Again,
I think let me answer that, Zubin, and maybe I'll leave it to Mona as well to touch upon. Uh, for lucky I think I've worked with all the organizations where leaders and the chairmen and the top leadership has always been very keen. If I talk about Wipro, you had Mr. AHP himself or Mr. Senior Premji himself, completing most of the courses inside, and you would always see him come into the library to kind of pick up some of the books for learning. And I've always seen in Wipro such a huge culture in the organization to kind of come up for learning and all that. And in any of the organizations, for example, Satyam, and right now, even in Dr. Reddy's, right? So I have not seen the challenge where we had to kind of push leaders to kind of come and learn or push them. So I'd possibly park that. But what do you offer them? So again, today, because most of the leaders are very digital, they are very tech savvy irrespective of the organization, right? And they are always on the move. They have less time, right? So there are often ways to kind of give them these initial nuggets. For example, there are good companies which offer you book summaries. There are companies which give you 5-10 minutes of videos. There are companies which give you industry trends like EBSCO and a lot of them, which gives you what's happening in the industry. So those are the things that you would want as an element of learning, being pushed, whichever platform that they're comfortable with, right? To be pushed, because if they are keen, they'll definitely come back to you, say, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you have more resources? I've seen scenarios where people come back and ask me, look, this is very interesting. Do you have any more supplementary learning on top of it? Right? So, but the constraint is time for them. Time, and you should use the time for providing the nuggets, and then they will come for it.
all right. Thanks, Naveen. There's a specific question for Mona, which comes from Srini. How have you collected data for application of learning?
Shini, I'm a person who is less number driven. So I operate primarily on the gut level. So when we talk about engagement, when we talk about learning goals, and when we talk about targets that we set for each learner, I'm also constantly in conversation with the peers of that individual, with the managers or the management of that individual, to understand how he or she has been performing. If there is topic A that they have picked up and they're working on, periodically I get in, probably have a look at the work or have a conversation with the peer or the manager to say, this person's been learning this. Are you seeing a difference? Is there any specific area that you would want her or him to focus further on? Are they able to take what they're learning, whatever it is, and apply it? Do you see the difference? So the application of learning is more in terms of hands-on. When they are doing it, if their management, if their peers, if they're able to see it and they're able to check the difference between before and after. If I don't know, I might be calling somebody for help every couple of minutes. But when I do understand the concepts, when I'm able to do something independently, when I'm getting to a point where I'm able to help answer the queries of my colleagues on that topic, then that's the application of learning. For me, that's the measurement that really matters.
All right, thanks, Mona. I'll take up the next question from Amit Saxena. How to define the objectives of technology-based learning in the organization?
Yeah. So I think there are. I could actually analyze this question in multiple ways. It could be the objectives what you're looking at. It could be what the leadership is looking at from ROI. Right, when you're talking about technology, at times it is more of investment, and you would initially get these questions on what do I get back, right? But more often than not, if you as a company, if you as an organization, irrespective of the size, because earlier they used to be saying that, no, look, I am just about 5,000 employee base. Do I really need this? But I think if you're not having that, trust me, if you're not having technology, I don't think, irrespective of the vertical, irrespective of learning domain, if you're not embracing technology, then you are not in the game. It could be a pharma, it could be a manufacturing, it could be a retail. If irrespective of whatever that problem that you have, if you're not embracing technology, then I think there's a big problem, right? But it is always very easy for me. Coming back to the root question, it's always easy, at least for me, to show a business justification in whatever that we have done. If you look at technology brings in that element of scale. Technology brings in that element of reducing the travel. Technology brings in that element of larger connectivity. It is much faster. Over the years, you can see the overall costs of training obviously comes down, right? And what else do you need when you have learning on the go, on the moment, right? You wouldn't want somebody to kind of miss out on learning, wait for a classroom for next 2 months, 3 months, and do it. Rather, you would want to have it on the mobile for the people, right? So it is actually very easy in these days, because it provides a lot of edge to employees to have any of your offerings provided and packaged through technology. I hope I've answered your question. Yeah, Amit.
In fact, the objectives of technology-based learning comes from the overall objectives of learning itself, isn't it? I mean, technology is
Correct.
just one of the medium or one of the ways to. I
Enablers.
mean,
Correct.
depending on the situation you are in, and of course, because of budget issues, but uh,
Correct.
we also look at technology as something that supports learning. I mean, it's not only about, hey, we have less money, so let's put everything down there. So technology is not, if we consider it to be less costly, and that's the reason why we should do it, then that definitely shouldn't be the reason. It has to be a balance between budget or budgeting, and also that in certain cases technology actually improves your learning experience. And you can also, with a lower cost, have a learning intervention that goes beyond what one day of classroom training can achieve.
Yeah. So just to add also, Zubin, I think when we talk about technology, it's often in learning area and space. Technology has always been synonymous to LMS, e-content. But I think today technology is not limited to that. It does not come in to replace classroom training anymore, because gone are the days when you look at LMS to be the replacement for a classroom training. No, I think if you look at technology, as simple as right now, right? We are now using technology to kind of get connected, and you use MS Teams today to have a lot of virtual classrooms where a faculty is trying to kind of beam his video, learn, and all that, right? So essentially, technology has always been a part of core learning, and it should not be. As I agree with you fully, it should not be looked at as a replacement to reduce cost, as a replacement to reduce a classroom training, right? So, and even if you take one step ahead, right now that we're working on AR VR, right, or a simulation based learning, which tops and on top of your traditional classroom training, right? So those are the experiences that you would want to give, which obviously comes at a cost, but which gives you that experience, and that's where technology plays a very, very vital role for your employees.
So I'll take up the next question from Manjeet again. This is very interesting. I like this question. Personal passion to learn versus versus organizational role based requirements. So again, it's like your passion, and then there's a role based requirement in the organization. How do you manage the fine balance to promote a user driven learning experience? Considering the first two I talked about, many a times when you give choice to the learner, the ask is multifold and not necessarily in line to the organization's interest. So now, how do you create that balance? Mona, would you like
Yeah.
to take that question?
Yeah, I'd like to. Naveen, you were saying something. Do you want to? And then
No, no,
I'll.
Yeah,
I'll
in
just
fact,
add.
I
Please,
would like
please.
both of you to answer this question because of the kinds of experiences you've had. Would love to listen to this. It's a very interesting question.
Sure. So, Manjeet, good question, and it's been there. I've been waiting to answer that. Um, when I spoke about the understanding the learner, right, and understanding where the learner is coming from, there is a continuous journey where she's or he's coming from and where they're wanting to go, and what is it that they need to do to get from point A to point B to point C. Now, your role as a learning professional, or my role as a learning professional, is to enable them on this journey. While we look at enabling them, empowering them, reskilling, upskilling, whatever, with the skills that they're required or the knowledge that is required for them to do their job. At the same time, as I said, you also have to keep in mind that it is an individual. For them, learning mostly has been something that they've done in school and college, and they are probably not going to be super enthusiastic about spending more time about doing it. So make it fun, have different kinds of learning. Naveen just mentioned mobile learning, he mentioned e-learning, he mentioned virtualization, he mentioned gamification, so many things that are coming up, adaptive learning. Try to find different kinds of learning which enable them to be interested. And it's got to be a mix. What you said, it's a balance. It's always a mix about organizational goals. Now, what does the organization want? It wants the bottom line, the profit, the revenue to go higher. How does it go higher? We be effective. We, the employees, we be effective of what we do it better. And how do you do it better? You get more knowledge, you get more skill in order to do that job better. So while that is one part, and that's where I think the learning professional has to balance between the org goals and the individual's passion. You also need to understand that this person needs to be motivated to learn. And that is where, when I'd started off, I'd said, learn anything that you want. And one of the companies that I've worked with, the leader told me, said, when I came up with this suggestion saying that we should allow the learner to pick up at least one learning area while they're doing XYZ for the org and for their careers. They should be allowed to do something which fuels their inner child, helps them learn. And the leader said, all right, so what you're saying is if somebody wants to learn how to make pasta, all you need to do as a learning professional is ask what kind, to enable them to figure out how to make it and learn how to make it. So it's a fine, constant balance about organizational goals, individual interest. What's in it for me? How do I learn? Why do I learn? That has to be managed. Naveen, your thoughts?
I think you have answered it, Mona, but As you said rightly, picking on the same thing, that it has to be always a fine balance, right? Because you wouldn't want people to learn something which is heavily invest themselves in something where you don't have an opportunity in that organization for that role, for where he's trying to build in, right? But at the same time, I think uh, apart from the learning partners, I think managers traditionally, or rather, I'd expect in any organization, managers to be those go-to people where you agree between the managers to see, hey, I know that you want to kind of be a full stack Java developer, but we have a lot of requirements in Python. But here's something that we could do, right? A small discussion between the manager and the employee would really go a long way, because that is the first point of contact that you will look at from every employee, right? So I think that's a very good question, but different organizations have different ways of handling it. It depends on the framework, it depends on your L&D objectives. It also depends on how empowering that you are for your learner to kind of go and pick it up within the year. Would you want to set an X number of hours aside for him or her in a year, to say you are free to kind of do this, we will reimburse that for you, which does not come in the way of organization learning. And here is the certifications that you must do, which will propel you to kind of move ahead for you to be successful in a certain role, right? So various policies, it all depends, as I said, the policies that L&D team defines, and the policy how the organization is willing to kind of empower the learner to go ahead.
All right, thanks, Naveen. I think we are almost at the end of the time for our session. So I don't think I'll be able to take further questions. Although I
Sure.
do see a few more there. So first of all, thank you so much to Mona and Naveen for taking the time out to be here, and most importantly to answer all the questions that came up so patiently, and with your thoughts, with your insights in place. And I'm sure everyone who's attending and everyone who'll be watching this later, by the way, because it's being recorded. So I'll definitely put it up so that more, there are a lot of people who could not join the session. They should be able to watch it and learn from it as well. So thank you so much, and I hope that we can stay connected and do further discussions in the
Yeah.
future.
Thank you, Zubin. Thank you, Mona. It's a pleasure, and I'll really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks.